The word itself carries a whisper of dread, a curse that haunted kings and queens, poisoning bloodlines and eroding empires. Imagine walking through the gleaming halls of royal palaces, chandeliers glittering, servants bowing low, music echoing from gilded chambers, while behind the silk curtains, unseen, a plague was waiting. It wasn't the plague of rats or cholera that swept away thousands. No, this one was quieter, crueler, more insidious. It seeped into the flesh of rulers, devoured their sanity, and left empires crumbling under the weight of whispered scandals and broken heirs. Tonight, we descend into the shadows of history, where crowns could not protect their wearers from the slow, invisible hand of disease. These are the royals who wore velvet by day and rotted in secret by night. Our journey begins in Portugal with a prince who was never meant to be king. Luís I was the second son of Queen Maria II, born into comfort, intellect, and a future free of responsibility. He was a scholar, a poet, a dreamer who adored Shakespeare so much that he translated plays into Portuguese, fluent in languages, charming with women. Luis embodied the fantasy of the cultured prince, enjoying luxuries while his elder brother Pedro bore the burden of rule. But fate has no mercy for dreamers. In 1861, a devastating outbreak of disease ripped through the Portuguese royal family, killing Pedro and Luis's younger brothers, Fernando and João. In a matter of weeks, Luis, the carefree playboy, was forced to wear the crown of Portugal. A kingdom was desperate for heirs. Marriage was not romance, but duty. Luis wrote frantically to cousins across Europe, searching for a bride. His choice was Maria Pia of Savoy, barely 14, daughter of the King of Italy. To her, Luis was everything: handsome, intelligent, refined. She bore him sons before her 18th birthday and embraced her role as queen with the devotion of a fairy tale princess. But fairy tales rarely last in palaces. Luis was unfaithful, entangled with mistresses, most famously the actress Rosa de Lima. Rumors swirled, and Maria Pia, shattered, began taking long trips abroad. Behind the curtain of royal duty, their marriage crumbled into bitterness and betrayal. Somewhere in this maze of affairs, Luis contracted syphilis. For years, the disease lingered, patient and silent. But by 1887, it struck back with vengeance, twisting his brilliant mind into shadows. Neurosyphilis clawed at him: headaches, seizures, wild mood swings, despair. The poet king, once celebrated for wit and charm, became a haunted shell. In 1889, at only 50 years old, Luis succumbed to the disease that mocked the power of his crown. Portugal's monarch had been undone not by war or rebellion, but by a parasite no throne could banish. Across the seas in Persia, another ruler battled the same fate. Abbas II inherited the Safavid throne at just 9 years old in 1632, a child king in a world of men. At 15, he seized control, casting out his father's vizier and steering his empire with unexpected strength. For years, he reigned with wisdom, keeping peace with the Ottomans, resisting foreign invasions, and building a reputation for fairness. His people admired him, for under Abbas, Persia experienced a rare bloom of peace. Yet beneath the golden surface, the young Shah was restless. Abbas had a taste for luxury, for wine, for endless nights of music and dancing. His harem grew into a city of its own, a labyrinth of women, concubines, courtesans, captives, each trapped in the politics of desire. His court became infamous for wild debauchery, where goblets of wine sparkled under torchlight, and laughter drowned the whispers of ministers. But even an emperor cannot outdrink fate. At only 34 years old, Abbas's body began to unravel. His mind grew clouded, his once commanding figure reduced to a husk. By 1666, syphilis had hollowed him out. The Shah of Persia, who once held the fate of nations in his hands, was consumed by a disease no sword could fight. He died young, and with him, the empire's strength began to falter. Europe, too, was not spared. The disease crept into Vienna, into the veins of a prince who was destined to inherit the mighty Habsburg throne. Crown Prince Rudolf of Austria, born in 1858, was a child of broken promises, separated from his beloved sister, beaten and belittled by his tutor. He grew into a man haunted by shadows. At 23, he was forced into marriage with Princess Stephanie of Belgium. She was just 17, eager and hopeful, but Rudolph's heart had no room for her. Even during their courtship, he paraded mistresses at her side, humiliating his bride before she even wore the crown. Soon, Rudolph's affairs carried a darker cost. He contracted syphilis and gonorrhea and passed them to Stephanie. Doctors lied, calling it stomach flu, but the truth was merciless. Her fallopian tubes destroyed, Stephanie could never bear another child. The future of the dynasty fractured in a single betrayal. Their marriage dissolved into bitterness. She sought love elsewhere. He drowned himself in alcohol, reckless affairs, and despair. By 1889, Rudolph's spiral reached its end. Obsessed with death, he begged his mistress Mitzi Kaspar to die with him. She refused. Desperate, he turned to a girl of only 17, Baroness Mary Wetzera, who adored him. Together they fled to Meyerling Lodge. Hours later, they were found lifeless. Mary shot, Rudolph dead by his own hand. To the world, the court whispered lies of aneurysms and accidents, but everyone knew the truth. Disease, betrayal, and despair had killed the heir of the Habsburg Empire. Before we continue deeper into this descent, remember that history is not just crowns and castles. It is also the secrets hidden behind closed doors, the shadows that even kings cannot escape. And if you find yourself drawn to these untold stories of dark history, consider subscribing. Each week we uncover the tragedies, scandals, and horrors the history books prefer to forget. Stay with us, because the story of syphilis among royals is far from over, and the next descent takes us into the very heart of madness. England in the 17th century was a kingdom of restoration, renewal, and ruin. At its glittering center stood King Charles II, the merry monarch whose court pulsed with decadence and intrigue. But if Charles was the sun, orbiting around him was a darker star, a man who shone too brightly and burned out too fast. The infamous Earl of Rochester, John Wilmot. From the moment of his birth in 1647, Rochester seemed destined for infamy. He inherited his title as a child, educated at Oxford by the age of 13, and celebrated as a war hero before he was even a man. He was intelligent, dangerously witty, and utterly magnetic. Charles II adored him, brought him close, and for a while, Rochester was the golden darling of the Restoration Court. Behind the dazzling poetry and glittering conversation lay a hunger for chaos. Rochester mocked kings and priests alike. He seduced actresses, noblewomen, and servants with equal fervor. He drank to oblivion, fought duels in the street, and led a gang of noble libertines through London's taverns and brothels. His words cut sharper than any sword, his satire exposing the hypocrisy of the powerful. But the same reckless tongue that made him famous also sealed his doom. When he ridiculed the king too openly, Charles banished him. Instead of retreating, Rochester reinvented himself. He took on the disguise of Dr. Bendo, a quack physician who promised cures for infertility. Dressed in false dignity, he roamed the city, examining women in secrecy, manipulating their hopes, and spreading both scandal and infection. He played doctor, trickster, and predator until his double life blurred into grotesque theater. But the stage was closing in. By his early 30s, the disease he had carried for years came to collect its due. Syphilis consumed him. His once handsome face decayed. His body betrayed him. Blindness crept in. His flesh weakened. His mind clouded. The poet, who once lit up England's salons, became a broken figure, dying in agony at only 33. He left behind verses that still burn with wit and fury, but his life stands as a cautionary tale. A man who mocked the crown, but was himself destroyed by an enemy that mocked them all. Yet if Rochester was consumed by excess, another ruler, Joseph I of Austria, was devoured by arrogance. Born in 1678, heir to the powerful Holy Roman Empire, Joseph was raised to believe the world itself bent before him. He was tall, charming, restless, and eager to taste every pleasure life could offer. From the moment he reached manhood, he indulged without restraint. His marriage to Wilhelmina, Amalia of Brunswick, was arranged, not chosen. She was devout, older, and dutiful. He was impatient, unfaithful, and hungry for more. His affairs scandalized the empire. Noble women whispered about his attentions. Peasants' daughters were summoned to his chambers, and one mistress after another paraded through his life. The court was outraged. Even the Pope protested, but Joseph shrugged it off. He was emperor now, untouchable, immune, or so he thought. Somewhere amid his endless conquests, Joseph contracted syphilis. Instead of shielding his wife, he passed it on to her. Wilhelmina, pious and innocent, mistook her symptoms for punishment from God. She prayed for healing, prayed for children, prayed for a son, but the disease left her barren. She gave Joseph 3 children, but none survived to secure the Habsburg future. The dynasty trembled. When Joseph died at only 32, wasted by the disease he had so carelessly spread, the burden of the empire shifted to his brother Charles. Yet Charles, too, failed to produce a male heir, and with Joseph's line broken, Europe spiraled into bitter wars over succession. One man's recklessness had rippled outward, destabilizing a continent. Across centuries and kingdoms, the story repeats itself like a curse. Luís of Portugal, Abbas of Persia, Rudolf of Austria, Rochester of England, Joseph of Austria. Kings, princes, poets, men draped in silk, armored with crowns, and yet powerless against the slow, creeping rot of syphilis. It stripped them of heirs, of sanity, of dignity, and in doing so, reshaped the fate of nations. What chills us most is not just their suffering, but the silence that followed. Official causes of death were altered, autopsies hidden, rumors buried. The word syphilis was banished from royal records because pride demanded deception. But truth seeps through the cracks of time. We know now what they tried to hide. Their portraits still hang in museums, regal, flawless, eternal. But behind the paint was rotting flesh, broken marriages, and dynasties eroded from within. History tells us that power is an illusion, that even emperors can be undone by forces they cannot see. Disease is the great equalizer, cutting through crowns and commoners alike. And in the haunted silence of these royal stories lies a lesson that the mightiest thrones can collapse not with the roar of battle, but with the whisper of decay. When you look at the faces of kings and queens in history books, do you see triumph or do you see tragedy hidden behind the brushstrokes? Tell me what you think. Were these rulers victims of fate or victims of their own reckless choices? Share your thoughts in the comments and let their ghosts speak once more.